Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We'll be starting shortly. Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to give everyone a couple of minutes just to join, and we will start very soon. Okay, hello and good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining this, our fifth of our Wednesday webinars. On behalf of the CLA, I am delighted to welcome you to what I'm sure will be an informative event. My name is Anne Maidment, and I'm the Regional Director for the Southwest, and I will be your chair for today's proceedings. I must start by thanking our partners, Stratton Parker and Barclays, who both have speaking roles today. Before introducing the speakers, I wanted to give you a brief update from us here at the CLA. The CLA team have been working from home through this period and continue to work hard to support and champion our members' interests. The COVID webpage is highly comprehensive, covering the breadth of government support and information in order to support and champion our members' interests. There are 14 member-only briefings covering a wide range of topics, and we keep them updated as government advice changes. We have continued to provide members across the country with bespoke specialist advice on a one-to-one basis, helping them with specific issues they face and saving them time and money. I would encourage members to contact their regional office should they need advice and support. To me, there has never been a more important time to be a member of the CLA, whatever your business needs. In terms of lobbying, as part of our roadmap to recovery, the CLA has published its paper, COVID-19, restarting the economy in rural areas. This came out last week and has been sent to government, arguing, amongst other points, that VAT on tourism businesses should be cut to 5% to boost the economy post-COVID-19. We continue to lobby on our members' behalves on key pieces of legislation, including the Agricultural Bill, which was debated last Wednesday, to ensure that farming businesses are given the right information so that they can plan for the future and adapt to the new system. Moving on to today's event, tourism industry is facing one of its toughest challenges to date. With tourism said to be worth in the region of 18.5 billion a year, employing over 600,000 people, it is no surprise that ministers are keen to restart the rural economy as much as we are. Almost overnight this spring, many businesses had to close their doors for an unknown period of time. Many farms now provide holiday lets, camping, bed and breakfast, and farm stays as a way to support their business. With the Prime Minister easing lockdown, thoughts turned to when and how to safely open the doors to the public. Today's webinar will take a positive approach to address the here and now, but also offer a forward look at options to future-proof the tourism sector. I would remind you that today's session is being recorded for future use and will be available on our website after the event. The format for this event is that our speakers will each talk in turn about their area. This will be followed by your questions, which I will pose to the panel on your behalf. Please do feel free to ask questions at any time using the Q&A button. Here are the biographies of our speakers today, and there will be the occasional poll, which I do hope you will be able to respond to as you have just done. To start this, I would welcome you, the audience, to answer that question, and then we can get a better understanding as we go through. I will now hand over to our first speaker, Charles Trotman.
Thank you very much, Jan. Good morning, everyone. I'm Charles Trotman, Senior Economist at the CLA in London, although today, obviously, I'm working from home. What we're going to do today is look at the economic impact of COVID-19 on tourism, as well as looking at the issues of recovery, how rural tourism businesses are going to actually recover when the lockdown actually comes to an end. So if I'm going to try and move my slides on, although I should have control. Yes, I should have. Michael, I've got a slight problem here with trying to get the slides down. Can you actually move them on, take control and move them on, please? As we're waiting for that, I think it's important to realise that of all the economic sectors in this country that will be affected by COVID-19, it's a case that the rural tourism sector, the tourism sector, and in particular rural tourism, will be the most affected of all those sectors. We calculate that we're looking at a loss at the moment of around £17 billion up to 2020. That could in fact increase if the scientific advice states that we're not able to unlock the lockdown until the 4th of July. And obviously, as the CLA lobbies government, what we're trying to do is ensure that the sector is opened up as quickly as is safely possible. And it's one of the key elements of this is to reassure both the operators, the visitors, but as importantly, the general public. It's important that that reassurance comes through consistent and uniform messaging. To give you another figure that we've come across, in the Southwest, in April, tourism businesses lost £1.2 billion in lost turnover just for that month. If you extend that throughout the year, we are talking a significant amount of money. We know that the government has put in place a series of support measures, including job retention. You've got the loan schemes, the bounce back schemes. The bounce back schemes have been very, very successful so far. It's important that those businesses are able to actually access those funds, certainly up to the beginning of the year or up to the end of the year and well into 2021. Now, given the size of the problem that we have, given the size of the impact of COVID-19 onto the rural tourism sector, it is important we look at the aspects of recovery. And as Anne has already said, we're looking, one of the major policy instruments that we want to use is to be able to reduce VAT from its current 20% to 5%. And we want that not just on a pilot basis, but all the way through for the next 5 years, because it's by doing that, you're able to actually get or have in place a proper economic stimulant which will drive forward rural tourism for the future. And it's important that rural tourism businesses are able to drive through for the future. One other aspect which needs to be taken into account is this whole issue about how you actually get ready for recovery. If we say that recovery is going to be on the 4th of July, it's important beforehand, certainly 2 weeks at least beforehand, to have in place a proper process, a proper structure. The industry, the whole industry, whether it be rural or urban, are working together to put forward an industry standard which can be signed up to by all tourism businesses. This is important because it'll actually set out the guidelines which are needed for those businesses to work safely and to gain the confidence of both the visitors and the local community. And I can't stress hard enough how important it is to gain the confidence of the local community. If we can just move the slides on a little, Michael, if that's possible. I think it's also important to realize that when you put all these measures together, we're looking at 5%, we're looking at 5% VAT rather than 20%, a proper industry standard in terms of self-certification and actually getting the industry and the sector up and running as quickly as possible. And you combine those with the current government measures, which, as I said, need to continue on well into 2021. It's important that the sector is able to put together with government a clear and concise roadmap. By doing that, we're able to balance the needs of rural tourism businesses, but as importantly, the expectations of the visitor. And it's important that businesses, when they recover, are able to generate repeat business, but they can only do that if that repeat business is based on safety. Through the risk assessment of each individual business, it's going to be important to convey that confidence, to reassure everybody, and to put in structures to extend the season. We've already heard today that Visit Britain want or pushing for a bank holiday in October. That is going to be absolutely crucial. Instead of having 3 winters, we need a winter, a summer, and another summer. We need to extend the season. We need to put in a structure that will extend the season to allow businesses to be able to recover from the very negative impacts of COVID-19. We want to reduce that potential loss, which, as I said right at the beginning, of £17 billion. We want to get that down, but we can only do so by actually working together, learning the lessons from the crisis, and actually coming back stronger than ever before. Now, what I'm going to do is hand over to Alistair for his presentation.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to introduce myself very quickly. I am Alistair Handyside. I'm the chairman of the South West Tourism Alliance, the Professional Association of Self-Caterers, and I have my own holiday cottage business in Devon. Next slide, please. I wanted to cover some key points about what the lockdown guidelines mean and getting ready. The lockdown guidelines actually say that some tourism businesses may be able to open on the 4th of July at the earliest. So I would caution everybody against too hard a planning on the 4th, because we don't know which businesses will open. That brings me to the next question, which is this sectoral approach. A lot of the government's approach to opening is what we call sectoral. So they say pubs may be able to open on a certain date, or holiday cottages. What we are arguing for is what we call a non-sectoral approach, which is businesses that could open safely, regardless of what they are, should be allowed to open at the earliest possible opportunity. Obviously, outdoor attractions could then come under that. Holiday lets could come under that. You know, restaurants that could eat outside or pubs that could eat outside could get some early opening and get some of that all-important business. In order to open, we're going to need guidelines. Guidelines will come shortly. We've been promised them. We're all working on them to give you the protocols, as they're called, to enable your business to open. That would tell you what cleaning regimes, what cleaning materials, all of those documents will be available to businesses before you open, and you should contact whatever your association that you work with, be the CLA or Professional Association of Sole Caterers. You should contact them to be on the list to get those guidelines. Other steps that you can take: a lot of businesses will have been in shutdown for a while. It's definitely time to really smarten up your business, get it ready to welcome those guests, so it's ready. Some guidelines that are not clear at the moment, though, are what we call shared facilities. This could be swimming pools, tennis courts, animal petting. No guidelines are currently available on those about whether they would be able to open in a shared environment. Again, you need to be in touch with your associations to make sure that you get this information as quickly as possible. The next slide, please. One of the biggest changes post-COVID is going to be what I'm calling the terms and conditions impact. The poll has just come up on your screen. The number one question that guests are asking now, after all of the furore through this ghastly affair, has been, what will be my cancellation terms? Will I get my money back if I have to cancel? Businesses that have harsh terms and conditions may struggle terribly with bookings afterwards. The customer's expectation is flexible booking. That is the way forward. There are ways that you can address this. So, you know, you really do need to look at your terms and conditions. Harsh and onerous terms and conditions will prevent bookings. Social distancing impacts. This is something you've got to look at very, very, very carefully. You know, the guidelines will cover social distancing, but you need to think about how those will impact your particular business and how you can protect your staff, your guests, and yourselves against any COVID impact. The last thing I'm going to cover is the fear factor or staycation boom. Which are we going to have? We're already seeing a lot of us that I've just seen that 86% of you will be reviewing your terms and conditions. Absolutely brilliant. Back to the fear factor. A huge number of us that operate holiday businesses are seeing people wishing to cancel because of the fear factor. A large number of people don't want to bring elderly relatives or people they feel are vulnerable or are just plain scared. So we have to balance that up against the alleged staycation boom that we may get. I see some threats for that, I'm afraid. Before we open, thousands of flights will be leaving for Spain and Portugal and Greece and Croatia, who are saying they are open for business. So we must pressure the government to hold, at absolute worst, hold that 4th of July date so that we can all get open again safely for our customers. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to hand over to Ralph Crawthorne from Strutt and Parker. Ralph, handing over to you. Have you got that?
Good morning, everyone. Ralph Crawthorne here. My role today is to take the long view, to get strategic for a few minutes. And I'm addressing really the estate owner whose tourism and other enterprises have come to a grinding halt, but also the estate owner who was thinking of moving into tourism and trade, but now isn't so sure. And I noticed that 24% of you don't actually currently have a tourism trade. So I suspect that's quite a lot of you. But a lot of what I say also applies to the owner of a single tourist enterprise. So the key strategic point that we have here is that trends accelerate in a crisis. And this is the fourth recession we've had in 20 years. And in every case, trends of the time, they accelerated. So these are some of the trends that have been affecting estates. They were affecting estates before the crisis. They're going to accelerate afterwards. And they're well known to you. And it's the millennials and others who are driving these. They now dominate the consumer market in the UK. Millennials have the bigger share of the purchasing power. So if you've ignored those trends in the past, you won't be able to do so in the future. Now, the big trend for estates is the move from being mainly about letting into being mainly about trade, tourism, and joint enterprise. And it's been about harnessing the entrepreneurial energy of both the owner, but also of those thousands of young entrepreneurs who don't want to be employees in life. It's about emerging brands, brand partnerships, new forms of joint venture. And the question is, will the pandemic slow this trend down? And our answer to that is no. There's an ambitious emerging generation of landowners who are determined to learn, adapt, and accelerate into this new, vibrant commercial future. So we're encouraging estate owners to take this opportunity to reflect. And we say, first, start with why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Not what should we do next? And the reason for that is that people buy why you do something over what you do. It's got to have a higher purpose and meaning beyond the protection of family wealth and the generation of profit. And if we're set on this journey into enterprise and tourism, we need to understand that people buy from people who believe the things that they do. And there's an amazing amount of synergy between the social and environmental good that estate owners believe in and what customers believe in. It just gets lost so often in the translation, often because it's never really been articulated in a way that customers can hear. Now, the second point will be a U-turn for those who've led their estates in what you might call a patrician style. This involves treating all stakeholders, whether they're employees, tenants, councillors, visitors, as customers, whether they pay for their visit or whatever, or their view, or whether they don't pay. We're delivering both public and private goods to the same customers. And if we do it well, we're going to generate loyalty, brand ambassadors, and repeat business. Thirdly, the markets are changing. Trends I've talked about and segmentation in the market is evolving fast. And we need to understand the mind of the consumer. Now, many of you are already experts in these three things, but still the business has fallen off a COVID cliff. And others were about to start on this journey. They're just saying, well, actually now I'm not so sure. And both are thinking, how do we build from here in 2020 in a way that's resilient and mitigates risk? And that's where we think that placemaking has a major role to play on estates. How do we do placemaking? Well, we have a team that is solely focused on this. And we've studied best practice on estates, and we've studied some failures. And this is what we've learned, and this is what we put in practice. We start with the sanctuaries, if you like, the no-go areas of privacy that are important to the owner. Then we identify which place above all others on the estate reflects the passions, values, purpose, ethos of the owner, the beating heart, if you like, of the estate, the place which will set the tone of the brand in the future. Then we identify all the other key places on the estate that lend themselves to being customer facing. And we borrow from the urban concept of the power of 10. 10 activities make a place, 10 places make a destination. Now, there's no magic in the number 10, but it's the principle that applies equally well to rural estates. Next comes the gateways into the estate. These are the gateways of the future. It may not be the way that people were welcomed into the estate in the past. Then the connections between the places. Many of these are going to need improvement if there's to be free movement from visitor attraction from enterprise to enterprise. Then a fresh interpretation of the primary contribution that each zone of the estate makes to enhancing life in this world. We believe passionately that a customer needs to be able to read an estate and see how it aligns with their beliefs. Then comes the skill of patiently finding those flagship enterprises. They're going to be the foundation. Oh, we've lost our slides. Let's see if we can get back in there. I think that should do it for us. Yeah. Then we look at the anchor businesses. These are the ones that are going to attract others. And then finally, the economic resilience emerges when you get clusters of businesses mutually reinforcing each other in collaborative culture that has its own world of aligned business structures, management agreements. So my long view is that the trend into tourism on estates will accelerate. Secondly, you need to link your purpose to the values of your chosen market segments. Then manage risk exposure. We do that through joint ventures, collaboration agreements, management agreements, brand partnerships, and strengthening the balance sheet. We've previously on one of these webinars talked about our time to review tool, which is all about strengthening the balance sheet, and that's available on the Stratton Parker Rural Hub, free for you to download. And then finally, undertake a thorough, estate-wide rural placemaking exercise to get the foundations for success into place. And if this pandemic shows us anything, it's that rural estates have what the world needs, and future-proofing is all about harnessing that demand. So now I'm going to hand over to Carl McConville, who heads up the landed estates branch aside of Barclays.
Thank you, Ralph. So it's without doubt that many landed estates and rural businesses have diversified into tourism, something that's been encouraged by many people, consultants, the CLA, the banks. And now we're seeing that these tourism businesses, or tourism parts of those businesses, are causing this current headache. It's without doubt to me that the sector of tourism, as was said right at the very start, is the sector that's being biggest hit within the rural economy. And we're seeing that every day with clients coming to us asking for help, advice, and all but help and support those businesses and ensure that they can continue into the future. Our main ethos at the moment is a business that was good last year will be good again next year, and that's what we need to try to look at all points. There are businesses that need help at the moment, and I'll come to where that help can come from shortly. And for those of you who have been on previous seminars, some of this will be a repeat for you. But looking specifically at tourism and what our clients are doing, I've been very impressed with how tourism businesses have grasped the opportunity to look at how they will come out of this and the opportunities for what they can do differently. This period of having to be closed has meant that many businesses have taken the opportunity or are taking the opportunity to do vital works within their businesses. Now, whether that's caravan parks, relaying electrics, or putting in better internet structures, or redoing playgrounds, things that you can't normally do at this time of year when you've got vast numbers of people running around your business. You have that opportunity, and hopefully it's a one-off opportunity to get some of this work done. And we're very encouraging and supportive of clients that want to go down that route, to set yourself up for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, making those changes. Think and change about what happens when they reopen. They're asking questions such as, Can we half reopen? How does that feel for us? Sorry, I understand my sound's dropping in and out. I'm not sure there's a lot I can do. If it carries on, then please just cut to the next speaker. Apologies. So where was I? Apologies. Yeah, so where business, how they set up for the future. What can they change? What can they do differently? How do they operate? Should they half open? Should they half open their businesses? That's a really difficult question. I think for small businesses, it's even more difficult. You can't have half a gardener. You can't have half a chef. You're either in or you're not in. And I think starting on the 5th of July or the 25th of July or whatever date we get that we're allowed to reopen, it might not be right for many to reopen straight away. I take on board what people have said earlier about whether people will just stay at home and continue locking down, or whether we'll see this rush to the British countryside. And at this moment in time, I don't think we know the answer to that as to what's going to happen. So whatever you do, I think it's opening carefully and sensibly. And this to me is where social media can play such a part. Talking to your clients, if you've got that data, about what they really want. Will they come and visit you? Will they be happy that they can't pet the animals if that's potentially not going to be allowed? Will that impact on their experience? So communicating now to get those sorts of answers, I think, is vital. So you really know what clients are going to accept and not accept. Coming to the support that's available, I think most of us are now aware the businesses that were rateable should be looking at a rate rebate and grants from their local authority. And if you haven't applied for those, then I would encourage you to do so. Many have been paid directly, but some people have had to apply. For those people that are running short of funds, then the government has introduced some support schemes. They are loans, they are not grants. The bounce back loan scheme is ideal for smaller businesses, run by most banks now. They're self-certified schemes that allow you to access up to £50,000 of funding that's fully supported by the government. No repayments needed for the first 12 months and then repaid over the following 5 years. So a really nice scheme, hopefully for most people quick to apply for. There are teams of most of the banks. But we are getting lots of money out of for businesses that really need it. Lots of money. Then the coronavirus business interruption loan scheme is available and is suitable for tourism businesses. That's available for up to £5 million. And yeah, it needs a strong business plan, needs a strong business track record, and needs a clearly articulated reason as to why that sum of money is required. And that's really difficult at the moment. Businesses are having to try to work out what the impact of this is going to be and when it's going to get back on track. Reasoned arguments, reasoned assumptions, and the banks will work with you. Also encourage people to think about business as usual. All of the banks are there. We're keen to support our clients and these businesses going forward. Have those conversations. Talk to your banks about how you can repay these debt. If it's not over a 5-year period, it might be a 10-year period, in which case a business as usual loan might be more appropriate. And lastly, before I hand on, I'd encourage you all to just think about adopting technology. In a time when we are wanting to not be as close to people around us with social distancing, think about using contactless technology. Think about whether you, with that cash when you do take it. Think about whether you do need to be going into your bank branch to take checks and to take cash in. Alternative solutions are readily available, and this technology is there, whether it's online bookings, taking money in advance from people, through card payments online, through to all sorts, all sorts of other things, including courier collect of cash and checks. There are loads of different ways that we can change our businesses and adapt our businesses to a modern technological world. With that note, I will hand on to Larry from Noah's Ark, and we'll hear what they've done. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Larry Bush. I'm the Managing Director here at Noah's Ark Zoo Farm. And we are a family-owned and run zoo on the outskirts of Bristol in North Somerset. And I'm going to be sharing with you this morning our plans and our thinking about the COVID crisis and what we're doing now. I'm going to be talking about what we plan to do for our reopening, and also I'm going to talk about our future thinking of how we're going to come through the storm and emerge as a new and different business. We do take some comfort from the fact there is a story about a Noah's Ark weathering a storm, and that one ended up in a good way. So we are hopeful and optimistic about the future. We're looking for rays of sunshine and hope for the future. So Noah's Ark started 20 years ago, and we have been running since 1999. We started as a farm park business, and then we have developed over the last 20 years to become a fully fledged zoo. So we now have a range of animals here. We have over 120 species, from farm animals, which is where we started, right the way through to the big zoo animals. We welcome 200,000 visitors each year, and we have 80 members of staff. We're very proud of our green and sustainable tourism. That means a lot to us. And we are really pushing hard on becoming a more accessible tourist attraction too. We're a member of various breeding programs. And our elephant program in particular, we have the largest elephant enclosure in the UK, and we're part of the European Elephant Endangered Species Program, where we provide a bachelor group for Europe. And this is one of our elephants. You can see here an African bull elephant called Shaka in the 20 acres of luscious green Somerset countryside. We have a large site. We're blessed to have a large site. We have 200 acres, of which the zoo occupies 100 acres of that. So we've got plenty of fresh air overlooking the Severn Estuary. But like all tourism businesses, we're facing huge challenges at the moment. We rely completely on visitors for our income. So we have no income coming into the zoo at the moment. But we also have high fixed costs. We've got over 25 keepers here right now. I'm at the zoo now. And that's what it takes to keep the zoo going 7 days a week and keep caring for the animals. So we are making the most of all the government schemes that we've just been hearing about from Carl. But even in spite of that, there's a strong imperative that we need to find a way to reopen safely and soon. In spite of that, we are trying to make the most of being closed and the opportunities this crisis presents. One of those is definitely the engagement that we can do through social media. We are pushing quite hard to bring the zoo into people's homes. We have empowered our animal keepers to make all kinds of videos, films, and talk about the stories behind the scenes. Like Kumi, the baby camel. You can see we had a Bactrian camel born a few weeks ago. And so we've been telling that story on social media. And we've been having great success with that. We are finding that there is a large captive audience out there, many of whom are at home looking for interesting things to watch and engage with on their mobiles. And so we are managing to extend our reach and engage with a much larger audience than we would usually do. And at least 200,000 people each week are watching our videos and getting involved with our social media. And we see part of that as our reopening strategy as well, because we see this as a way that we can build anticipation and excitement. So as soon as we are able to open our doors, then people will want to come. And it's also an educational thing we can do. We know homeschooling is difficult, and this is something we can contribute. Looking ahead, we are into our reopening plans. We're starting to map out those plans. Like everyone, we don't know exactly when we will be able to reopen, but we have social distancing plans in place. These two Andean bears are not observing good social distancing. However, they are a breeding pair. We're hoping they may breed in the future. But our social distancing plans include a whole number of measures. And we have some polls coming up. It would be interesting to hear what other people are thinking. But our measures include pre-booking online only, so we can control and plan for how many visitors are going to come every day. So we're not going to be accepting walk-up admissions, which is a big change for us. We are also looking to have a cap on visitor numbers. We need to hear more about the guidelines to set that cap. And again, we're going to have a poll in a minute to see what people are thinking in terms of what capacity level we're going to be able to be at when we reopen. But we are planning for different scenarios in our finances too. We're also working very hard on the visitor experience. We are going to have a different visitor experience. We won't be able to run all the animal shows we usually do, or run events which would involve a crowd gathering. So we are going to change the visitor experience and the journey. And a big part of it for us is staff safety and confidence. We need our staff to feel really comfortable and safe at work so that they in turn can give our visitors a great day out. Communication is going to be key beforehand as well as on site, through signage, through social media. We're going to be emailing out instructions ahead of time, lots of things like that. So finally, moving on to the future, we are ready to leap into the future, and this crisis, this storm, is going to be a catalyst for us. It's going to force us all to change, and we're going to be absolutely changing here as a business and as a visitor attraction. So we're planning to take bold steps. We don't know all of the detail about this, but we know we are going to have to reshape ourselves so we're fit for the future. Digital and social media are proving very successful in this crisis, and we would anticipate upweighting that. Interesting results coming through about capacity. It looks as though 50 to 60% is where most people are thinking, but quite a range there in terms of capacity and limits on visitor numbers. So thanks for all your answers for that. And yes, other aspects include refreshing the visitor experience, more flexible teamwork. We're going to have to be more lean and more agile as a team. And we also, as a business, we are looking at how we can restructure our family business for the future, so it is really fit for what's to come. So thank you for being here this morning. Thanks for the time listening to me. And like Hetty, our battery and camel, I would encourage you to keep on smiling. It's very difficult at times. It is a very worrying time. But in the words of the soon-to-be Sir Captain Tom Moore, tomorrow will be a good day. So thank you for being part of this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Larry, and thank you to all our speakers this morning. We've had some excellent questions coming in, so I'm going to start with talking about the subject of marketing. We had a question come in from Andrew Clark, and this was, could Noah's Ark Zoo and Higher Wiscombe Holiday Cottages confirm how their marketing strategy will change in light of COVID-19? In addition to that, we have been asked how should businesses market their product to stand out from all others doing the same. There is a concern that although it would be excellent when we are reopen, but there may be a saturated market, and how do we do this? So I'd like to put that to Alistair first, and then Larry.
Well, the first thing I said earlier about making sure that your terms and conditions are really clear and flexible. We have managed to secure an insurance policy at our business that means that we are in fact going to insure the guests' booking, so that we don't really have to worry about whether they want to cancel or not and get into an argument about terms and conditions and how many days before and do we keep their deposit. We're just going to say, yes, you can have your money back, and then claim that off. Now, we obviously pay for that policy, but just like the loo rolls, the guests pay for the loo rolls and they'll be paying for the insurance. So insurance post-COVID for guests is going to be very expensive and very ineffective. So we have decided that we are just going to have an open cancellation policy to give our customers confidence. That will form a large part of our new marketing, if you like. We've reinvested in the business over the winter, as many of you have done. So we will have a new offer, newly proposed, new terms and conditions, you know, and to try and be fit for the post-COVID customer, who will be more discerning than ever, and they will be more careful with their money than ever before. So social media, which I'll let Larry talk more about that because he's got some great stuff on that. It's an absolutely critical part to keep your customers engaged with you as a personal business. Going back to what Ralph was saying, you know, they need to feel they're dealing with you rather than a corporation. So I'll hand over to Larry at that point.
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. I think what I would add to that is social media and digital. We believe that that's going to become a hugely dominant part of our marketing. It was already growing, but I think this links with what Ralph said earlier on. I think that trend is going to accelerate, and we're certainly going to be doing a much higher proportion of our marketing will be digital and social media. One reason for that is I don't think people are going to really trust printed communication for a while, because things are changing so quickly that I think the only thing they'll really trust was real-time information and marketing that they can pick up on their mobile and websites. I think the second thing I think which will change, certainly in the short to medium term, is our marketing is mainly going to be about safety, because people want to feel safe when they come to site. They want to know what to expect, and so actually it's going to be much more information giving in our marketing than we're used to. And I think that's going to be the key thing that our customers want to hear from us.
Okay, thank you. Ralph.
And just on that, one of the trends we highlighted was this drift that has been taking place over the last decades from managing uncertainty in a risk management approach, where we take the advice of experts and listen to them, to the new way of approaching risk and uncertainty, which is to live under threat. So in other words, the risk itself, the uncertainty, has the agency in our lives. No longer do we take that agency over the risk. And it's a cultural shift that is dominant in the millennials and below. And so Larry's absolutely right to say fear is going to be a really rising phenomenon in the minds of the market. And we see that the government's putting the fear over the economy, and so it goes on. And this compromise, but it's a generational shift in how we approach risk, and we need to face up to that with our tourism businesses.
Thank you, Ralph. Okay, moving on to the next question. This comes from Daniela Kilsby-Steele. And Charles, I'd like to ask you, what are your thoughts on businesses being able to half open and how this will impact them, e.g. a pub that can only operate half full and would probably prefer to be closed with support rather than half opening and running at a loss?
Thanks, Anne. I think that the key here is to recognise that this will be a phased approach. That the government's roadmap makes it very clear that some businesses after the 4th of July, if they're able to open, only a few of them, or only some of them will. Not every single business will be able to reopen. Now, in terms of pubs, it's very much the case that you have to ensure that your visitor, that the person coming into the pub, is safe, that they meet social distancing guidelines, and that they feel safe, that you're able to reassure them. That will mean you'll have to reduce your capacity. It will have to be the business's decision if they were to remain open or to restart the business. We are pushing the government to make sure that the current support measures remain in place, certainly until into 2021, so beyond this year. We also want to see the business rates holiday extended again, and for the government to put in place a proper and effective delivery platform in terms of economic stability. Because if we don't have that, and if we have a potential second wave, then economically we're going to be in a far worse situation than we are now. It's going to be a case of adjustment. It's going to be a case of reassurance.
Thank you, Charles. Larry, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, just to add to what Charles was saying, I think when it comes to can you be open with half the numbers and it's viable, I think what we're trying to do is find ways that we can ease into a higher capacity over a period of time. So we'll start with a lower number of visitors, but we're going to find ways to spread people out across our site. We're looking at things like different entry times, for example, through the day. We're looking at different flows so we can encourage people to flow around the site. So I think part of the reopening strategy for all visitor attraction needs to be to make the best use of the space and to try and find a way of increasing the numbers you're able to have in safely. And I think it will be something that we need to phase in over weeks and maybe months so that we can get the capacity up to a level where we can be financially viable.
Okay, thanks, Dan. I'm going to move on to a couple of questions we've had in about holiday cottages. One from James Coker is, how can we get our holiday cottage ready and available for visitor occupation if we're unable to travel to Cornwall and stay overnight? And following on from that, Emily Humphreys has asked, what would you advise for making the general public confident in the cleaning and maintenance of holiday cottages after COVID-19?
I wish I could reveal the details that are not yet finished. There will be two elements to this, Emily. One is that there will be a certification scheme. If you go onto the Visit Britain website, you'll be able to find that there is a scheme being created where you would be able to show a certificate that you have gone through COVID-19 mitigation. It'll be an online self-assessment system, and it will be free of charge to the businesses. In parallel with that, UK Hospitality and all of the major hospitality associations are feeding into detailed protocols for each sector. So there will be holiday let guidance on how to prepare your holiday let, how to clean it between changeovers. And the main thing we're resisting at the moment is the kind of 3-day shutdown between lets. That's not proving to be necessary, we don't think. Those guidelines will be available shortly. The delay is not us, the delay is government sign-off. So we are obviously pressing the government to get these so that we can get them out to you as quickly as possible. But they will be available well before you open.
Good to know. Thanks, Alistair. And moving on from that, again, two questions that have come in. One from Robert Parton, with primary schools appearing to be pushing back reopening and universities doing online programs, how realistic is a mass reopen? Or do you see a scenario where we only reopen similar to the golf club model of a small family group? And Ben Thomas then said, do the panel think that attractions will hold the line on the government's guidelines of reopening on the 4th of July? There are examples of gardens breaking ranks already and opening to paying visitors. Is this helpful?
If I could answer that, on Ben's question about attractions, as long as, when everything is able to reopen, as long as the attraction is able to maintain and meet the social distancing rules and they comply with the hygiene rules which have been set out, Alistair says there will be risk assessments involved, there will be an industry standard, then there shouldn't be an issue. If, however, that attraction is seen to break those rules, it will be closed down. It's very, very straightforward. In terms of the gardens issue, we're seeking clarity from government. The step one of the government roadmap makes it clear that outdoor ticketed events are not allowed to open. Now we're seeking clarity from government as to whether that includes gardens. We know that in a phased approach, some gardens are reopening. But again, they can only reopen if they meet the guidelines set out by the government. If they can't meet those guidelines, and if there is no risk assessment in place, they either will not be allowed to reopen or they will be closed down by the authorities.
Okay, thank you. Ralph, a question for you, talking about estates and future proofing. We had a question from Andrew Bradford about what happens if you're tenant farmers.
Well, everything that I was talking about in the reimagining of an estate as it moves into trade and enterprise, actually the land is the thing that speaks volumes as visitors come and see what's going on it and how it's being farmed and so on. So the engagement of the tenant community with what the direction the landowner is taking his enterprises is really important. And I am seeing and calling for a new collaboration engagement with tenant farmers in a way that may incorporate fresh investment, but it is about trying to find alignment between the direction the estate's moving in and how the tenants are operating on their farms. Most landowners will be having very deep and meaningful conversations with all their farm tenants right now, because the world's going to be a very different place, in not just because of COVID, but because of all the other trends.
Thank you, Ralph. We've had a question from Richard Barnett. Larry, we all sympathise with your position. Have you had any support for staff costs for staff you cannot furlough due to animal welfare needs? And what more could the government do to support you?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, it is a big challenge with the high fixed costs of zoo keepers, animal keepers. We are hoping there is going to be government support. There has been an announcement of a zoo support fund. And so I think we, like all zoos, are in the process of applying for that for help. I think it will be limited, the amount of help it provides. So really what we are hoping is that we are permitted to reopen in a safe way. I think that's the only really sustainable solution. And as was just mentioned about the timings, I think we feel there is a strong case that open spaces, outdoor spaces, are seen as a lower risk. So we feel that we could be included at the moment, the ticketed outdoor attractions, the timings announced the 4th of July, but there are discussions going on with DEFRA, the British Zoo Association, National Farm Attractions Network, about potentially a mid-June opening a bit earlier, because I think reopening is the only real solution. I think government funding is only going to go so far.
Okay, thanks. Ralph, yes.
We've had a number of questions, haven't we, about the phasing of reopening, and we've focused largely on the regulations and how much we're permitted to and the economics. But I think the question that will be asked of business people looking back after COVID is, what did you do in the crisis? How did you do it? And how these businesses will be regarded in the court of public opinion afterwards, looking back. And going back to the points I've been making about purpose and meaning and aligning those with the market. So how are you treating key workers or NHS staff, and how are you introducing some of the things you believe in into that actually your future market believes into, and they will say, well, we saw what you did and we believe in the same things you believe in, and that we're going to be loyal to you going forward in the long term. Profit will follow, is my belief, if we can get over this hump.
Thank you, Ralph. We've had a couple of questions come in about caravan sites. So Lisa Gerard has said, we have a touring caravan site, as caravans have their own facilities, i.e. toilet and wash facilities. Do you feel we will be able to open sooner rather than later in the roadmap of tourism? And also from Mark Houghton, I own a touring caravan site offering summer season pitches. If I implement social distancing measures, can I reopen on the 4th of July? Charles.
Well, yeah, decisions on reopening will be taken obviously by the government. In terms of touring caravan sites, it's very possible, and it comes back to Larry's point about the scientific evidence. The science proves that if you're outdoor, your risk of infection is significantly less. So it's clearly the case that if you're touring caravan site, it should be possible to reopen a lot quicker and a lot faster than the 4th of July. Discussions are currently taking place with government, with DCMS and DEFRA, to see which businesses, which types of business, campsites, caravan parks, etc., can reopen in a period before the 4th of July as pilot schemes, so that government and the industry is able to monitor what the impact is and what the effects are, and then follow that through post 4th of July. we need to get everything in place first. We need to get the right structures in place. We need to get the right standards. We need to get everybody through a government industry roadmap to sign up to what we're trying to do. But the intention is certainly from the discussions we've had with government to see what the possibilities are of reopening certain businesses, such as touring caravan sites, before the 4th of July. But as I said, those discussions are ongoing.
Thank you. I think we've just got time for a couple more quick questions. One from Murray Carl has come in. Alistair, I'd like to ask you this. Do you think that in terms of hospitality pricing, there will be a rush to the bottom as we saw back in 2008?
It's a very uncertain market out there. Will there be, as I said, a staycation or a fear factor? Certainly over the last 10 days, the level of interest in bookings, visits to websites, the visits to booking sites and the bookings, whilst they are not at mid-May levels compared to last year, are on an upward curve. There is a definite appetite for people to break out of their homes and go and find somewhere else to sit, visit, explore, enjoy Larry's zoo. There's a definite appetite for it. My advice would be hold firm on your pricing. So many people will not be reopening that you should be as firm and confident with your pricing as you possibly can.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, and just one final one that we had in from Vanessa Scott. Charles, has any business made successful claims under business interruption? If you could give a bit of feedback on that, that would be really helpful.
One of the problems that we've got is the, one could say, the attitude of the insurance companies in terms of what the cover is and what COVID-19 is. It's a pandemic, it's a new disease. The problem is that the insurance companies have taken that and said, you're not covered for it. The Financial Conduct Authority has taken the view that they've got two routes. One, the legal route, that they wish to take a number of cases before the courts to see whether the terms and the wording that insurance companies have set out are actually legally binding and legally valid. And the second element is that if a business has a concern, they can go to the Financial Services Ombudsman. Unfortunately, it will take time for all this to go through the courts, but we are trying to discuss with the insurance companies a far more flexible attitude and a far more flexible approach that they need to take in the future and in the present time to ensure that businesses can actually adapt to current situations and actually get the cover that they're actually paying for. And it comes back to Alistair's point, we need to be flexible, need to be agile, but the insurance companies have a major role to play in this, and they've got to step up to the mark, because at the moment, all the evidence points to the insurance companies not doing that. They have a responsibility, both a moral and an economic responsibility to businesses and communities in this country.
Thank you. Alistair, did you just want to follow up on that at all?
Yeah, just if three very common policies for you out there will be the Royal Sun Alliance Cottage Shore Gallagher's policy, the NFU Mutual policies, and Schofields policies. If you go onto Facebook, each of those have action groups that are forming to make sure that these people are held to account. So if you have a Schofields, an RSA Cottage Shore Gallagher's, or an NFU Mutual, there are action groups working on your behalf that you can join for free.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alistair. And thank you to all the panelists today and for the audience.
And,
yes, Charles.
And can I just make a plea or ask those with campsites if they could get hold of me via my email, charles.trotman@cla.org.uk, with details as to how they think they might be able to reopen, because we can then feed that information directly into Visit Britain and Visit England as they're putting together the industry standard, because apparently the campsites are proving to be a major issue. Thanks, Sam.
Great, thank you, Charles. So again, as I say, thank you very much to the panel and to the audience for your participation today. There are some polls coming on now, which we'd appreciate some feedback on these webinars and what you would like to see from us moving forward. I'm sorry we couldn't get through all of your questions. We did try, but unfortunately ran out of time. But do contact your regional office if you would like any further advice and feed in any comments afterwards. You'll see here there are the up and coming webinars. Next week we have a discussion on natural capital. This will include Harry Greenfield from the CLA as well as Archie Ruggles-Bryce. And in addition to this, we have the In Conversation with sessions with our President Mark Bridgman. The next one with Jake Fiennes from Holcombe Estate, who leads the conservation work at Holcombe, and we'll be talking to Mark about the future of conservation and how this fits along farming and food production. So it should be very interesting. So that's it for now, and thank you very much for joining us, and enjoy the sunshine.